Hi, my name is Isabella from Rio, Brazil. I have been married to my husband, João, for 15 years now. We have 4 children together, all girls. I used to be sad about it, but my husband has always assured me that he was okay with having only female children. Do you think he meant it? I started dating my husband João when I was 17 years old. I first met him when my family moved to Rio, when I was 17 years old. When I locked eyes with him in the park, I felt a sudden rush of joy in my heart. He smiled back at me, and I knew it was a match made in heaven. At 32 years, we had built a strong household, and our love was stronger than anything. To put that into perspective, I have spent almost half my life loving this man. In fact, I trust him so much that one of the policies I created for my marriage was that I will never, and I repeat, never check my husband's phone no matter what. My husband has never given me any reason to even check his phone. Why create a problem where there is none? Our anniversary was on the 21st of March. He was away in the capital, Brasilia, for a business meeting, but he promised to fly back home for the celebration on the afternoon of that day. I guess I forgot to mention about my husband's business. At only 22 years old, he had pitched a tourism business idea to a wealthy investor who bought into the idea. In the course of 11 years only, João managed to own almost half of the tourist agencies in Rio de Janeiro. Since I realized how important the business meeting could have been, I realized that it was best that he attend the meeting since he would still be back for the anniversary regardless. With the help of my 4 girls, Fernanda, Gabriela, Elisa, and Marcela, I was able to organize a surprise party. I invited some of his close friends, and even his immediate younger sister was present. As we waited for him to arrive, we decided to switch on the TV and open YouTube on our smart TV, and luckily, Exploring Relationship Dilemmas had dropped a new banger. We therefore spent our time watching the videos, keeping everybody entertained. You should subscribe too for juicy relationship stories and relationship advice. Anyway, it was getting late into the evening and my husband was still nowhere to be found. I tried to call his lines several times, but it was switched off. Disappointed, the guests had to leave one by one. Unable to control my emotions, I cried my eyes out. I didn't hear from him that entire night. My girls and I didn't close our eyes throughout the night. That was so unlike my husband. Was he tied up with business so much? Shouldn't he have at least called or texted?
It was a rainy night, and João sat nervously at the small, dimly lit table in the back room of a frail building deep within the favelas. His heart pounded in his chest, the rhythmic thumping loud in his ears, drowning out everything else. He was supposed to be in Brasilia for a business meeting, but instead, he ended up here, caught between the walls of his own choices. Felicia stood across from him, her arms crossed tightly as she held the dress João had bought for her, eyes hard and calculating. She was far from the woman he had once been infatuated with. Now, she seemed more like a stranger, someone with an agenda of her own. But he couldn't escape. Not now.
Você não tem escolha, João. Você quer se livrar de mim, não é? Então assine. Esta é a única maneira.
Felicia said as she pointed at the table. João's hands trembled as he stared at the will in front of him, the ink still fresh. His name was already signed on the bottom, but there was a section left to fill in, the part that would change everything. The part that would secure his son's future, and, by extension, Felicia's hold over him. His lips were dry, and his mind raced.
Eu nunca quis nada disso. Eu nunca quis machucar Isabella.
Felicia's voice cut him off sharply.
Não é mais sobre Isabela, João. Trata-se de garantir que seu filho tenha um lugar neste mundo. Ele merece isso, e se quiser me manter calado, então assine esse papel. Do jeito que as coisas estão agora, se você não fizer isso, vou garantir que Isabela descubra tudo. Como você ainda está pagando minhas contas. Como você veio aqui pelas costas dela. Não pense que ela não sabe que algo está errado.
A shiver ran through João, guilt and panic battling within him. He could feel the pressure mounting, the weight of his secret suffocating him. He loved Isabella, he had always loved her. But the lie had spiraled too far, and now like a deer surrounded by a pride of lions, he was cornered. He had built everything, with her by his side, but there was this child, a son he hadn't planned for, a future he couldn't escape. And Felicia was right, if he didn't comply, everything he'd worked for could be exposed. His reputation, his family, his marriage.
Felícia, isso não está certo. Eu não quero machucar Isabella, não assim.
She stepped forward, her expression unwavering, eyes dark.
Então é melhor você pensar no seu filho, João. Sua família. Se você não quer que tudo isso desmorone, você vai assinar. Sua esposa nunca descobrirá. Nós iremos embora e você pode voltar a fingir que está tudo bem.
João closed his eyes, a deep breath escaping his chest. He thought of Isabella, her laugh, her warmth. He thought of their daughters, the life they had built together. But he also thought of Carlos, his son, the child that would need security. Felicia's words haunted him.
Você não tem escolha.
He picked up the pen, his hand shaking. For a moment, he thought about what he was doing, about the irreversible consequences. But then, his thoughts clouded with fear and guilt. He signed the document, sealing his fate. He signed away his future, his family's future, all for the promise of silence and security. As the ink dried on the paper, Felicia smirked, her victory clear.
Bom, agora não esqueça, João. Você está nisso comigo. Deslize e tudo desmoronará.
João sat back, his head spinning. He had made a decision that would haunt him forever. The guilt gnawed at him, but the fear of losing everything, of having his secrets revealed, was too much to bear. João was overwhelmed, and he pushed Felicia against the wall. It was a big mistake.
At around 9:40 a.m. the next day, my phone rang. It was my father-in-law. I picked up my phone and greeted him, but my greeting was unreciprocated. He seemed so distraught and then spoke. He said that João had been admitted in a hospital in Rio and asked me to get there as soon as possible. My mouth dropped after hearing those words. But he is in Brasilia, I said without noticing that the line was already disconnected. Like a madwoman, I quickly put one and two together and carried my children to my parents' house, who were as surprised as I was. From there, I made my way to the hospital, which was in close proximity to the favelas of the city. I got to the hospital and met João in a very critical condition. He was on life support. There were bruises all over his body. I thought it was an accident, and I felt so guilty for assuming the worst, yet he had just suffered a fatal accident, most probably as he was traveling back from his meeting. However, I noticed that he must have traveled by plane, yet I knew that it could have still been a car crash. I mean, I also hadn't heard of any plane crashes. Concerned, I decided to ask the doctor what happened. When I met the doctor, I asked, "Good morning, doctor. What exactly happened to João?" He looked at me pitifully and sighed before saying the most unexpected words.
Dona Isabella, seu marido, o senhor João, infelizmente levou 5 tiros e foi espancado brutalmente.
The doctor said while patting my shoulder to calm me. I started crying uncontrollably. I couldn't believe that had just happened. When I last saw him, he was so healthy. I called my in-laws, who told me they were already on their way. I held my husband's hands and was crying. "Baby, please don't leave me alone in this wicked world. I can't do this life alone without you." I whispered into his ear, even though he was unconscious. In the afternoon, my husband's parents and his elder brother arrived from the village. It was then I got to know what really happened to João. Apparently, my husband has a 1-year-old son with another woman called Felicia. It seemed that João had lied about the business trip to Brasilia. He had gone to visit Felicia in the favelas. They had an argument, and João hit her. With anger, this woman called her boyfriend, who is part of a criminal gang in the favelas of Rio. The boyfriend came in fuming with anger, and they shot him and beat him brutally. The neighbors overheard the commotion and they stepped in, eventually taking João to the hospital. Unfortunately, only the boyfriend was apprehended. The woman is still on the run. Tears dried up immediately from my eyes. All I felt was disgust and hate for my husband. Did you need a male child so bad that you did this to me? You told me you were okay, João. You told me female children are also important. You told me to stop crying and worrying myself over having a male child. Why didn't you tell me you weren't okay? I said these words with disgust in my eyes. My mother-in-law tried her best to pacify me.
Nós o avisamos para deixar aquela mulher, mas ele não quis ouvir.
My mother-in-law said. So, they were even aware of their son's affair. I felt a sharp surge of pain in my chest. I was short of breath. I never would have guessed that my husband would ever do this to me. It was so unexpected. I stormed out of the hospital in anger and boarded a taxi to take me to the park where I first met João. The park where I met João was so significant to me, not only because I first met him there, but also because our wedding was held there. My husband is reaping what he sowed, and I won't be part of it, I said to myself. The taxi dropped me at the park, and I went and sat by the venue where our wedding was held. Coincidentally, another wedding was taking place, and the bride was saying her vows.
Para o bem ou para o mal, na doença e na saúde, até que a morte nos separe.
I reminisced how I said those words with so much passion as I said my vows to João. That exact moment replayed several times in my mind. I sat down and decided to calm down. João needed me, so I ought to be there for him. I decided to go back to the hospital. I returned back to the hospital and tended to my wounded husband. I hated him, but I still needed to do what I had to do as his wife. The next day, his parents and his brother traveled back to their hometown. I was left alone with him. My mother came the next day and stayed with me for a day before traveling back to stay with the children. I put my life on hold to stay by the side of this undeserving man. It wasn't easy for me at all. My husband was in coma for 2 weeks before he finally regained consciousness. He couldn't look me in the eyes. He couldn't speak yet, but his face showed that he was ashamed of his actions. He began to get better day by day, although some of the injuries were looking so bad. One evening, I was dozing off by the side of the bed when my husband held my hands.
My wife, I am so sorry.
He said while groaning in pain. I was startled. I didn't know he had even regained his composure and ability to speak.
I didn't want to bother you. I just needed a son to bear my name. I am so sorry. That woman is far beneath you.
My husband said. He was in so much pain. I just told him to stop speaking and wait till he gets better for us to settle scores. I held his hand and lied by his side. We were both crying. I fell asleep by his side with an excruciating headache because I cried too much. Unfortunately, that was the last time I heard from my husband. He died that night, right next to me. I cried my eyes out. His family came and took his body to his hometown. I finally got reunited with my girls after 2 weeks away from them. They were asking about their father, and I didn't know the answer to give them. My husband was buried 2 weeks after. This was just too much for me, but that might have just been the start of my problems. I was in the living room with my mom when 2 men dressed in suits came into the house. I was given a notice to leave the house. I was surprised. My husband built this house. Who is asking me to leave this house?
Senhora, esta casa foi vendida ao meu cliente na semana passada.
Aconselho você a desocupar este prédio antes da data prevista.
Who sold this house? I asked, perplexed. I was presented with the house documents, which now bear the name of a new owner. On the documents, the rightful owner of the home was a man named Gabriel Silva, who had bought the house from Felicia Santos. The house was sold by Felicia to Gabriel Silva. My agony was tripled. This house was built by my husband and I. I contributed to the building of this house. I don't deserve this. I cried out. I decided to go to the bank to inquire about my husband's finances when I got the shock of my life. My husband changed his next of kin from my name to his son's name, Carlos Alves. This was the son Felicia had for him. I couldn't believe what João had done. Like, come on, he really set out to hurt me that much. First, having affairs with another woman, getting a child from her, and now assigning all property, most of which I had contributed to another person. Our joint account had been cleared. I couldn't even access his own account because I wasn't the next of kin on the account. The business he owned was in the last stages of completing transfer to another wealthy businessman in Rio. At the end of it all, Felicia had benefited. She took everything and fled away with her son. It was painful. The shock of João's accident, no, betrayal, was still fresh when I began to move out. After everything that had happened, I thought I had seen all there was to see. The lies, the deceit, the pain he caused. But the following morning, as I looked to pack out the things inside my drawer, I came across something I never expected to find. A small, crumpled envelope, addressed to me. My hands shook as I opened it, and inside, I found a will, but not the one that had been presented by the lawyers. This was a different one, handwritten months before everything fell apart. It was dated when we were still happy, when I believed in the future João had promised us. I reached out to my lawyer, showing him the letter. And as I did, I found out something that changed everything. João had made sure I was still the rightful owner of our home and business in the event of his death, and he had left Felicia's son with only a small portion. This will gave me a fighting chance to reclaim what was rightfully mine. As I started to regain control of the situation, something unexpected happened. I received a voicemail from the hospital, one I couldn't ignore. It was from the nurse who had been with João during his coma.
Dona Isabella, antes de o seu marido falecer, deixou-lhe algo. Uma mensagem final. Gravou logo depois de recuperar a consciência, mas antes de, bem, já sabe. Mantivemos seguro para si, como ele pediu.
Isabella, my love, I know I've done terrible things. I don't deserve your forgiveness. But please know this. Everything I did, everything that went wrong, was because I felt like I had nothing to hold on to. I was scared, Isabella. Scared that I wasn't enough for you or our daughters. I convinced myself that a son would make everything right, that I could build something better if I had someone to pass it down to. But I was wrong. I was so wrong. You and the girls, you were always enough. Please believe that. I've let you down in the worst possible way. I've failed you. But before I leave, I need you to know I love you. I always did. I will love you until my last breath. And I'm so sorry, Isabella. I'm sorry for the pain, the betrayal, everything.
I could barely breathe as I listened to his words. Was this the João I had known? The man who had loved me? Or was this just another attempt to excuse his actions? I don't know. I had been so caught up in the betrayal, in the lies, in the anger, that I hadn't seen the pain João had been carrying. He had been afraid of not being enough, of failing me. He had tried to cover that fear with the lie of needing a son, but deep down, he had wanted to fix things with me. After months of legal battles, I finally won the case. It wasn't easy, but I refused to give up. The turning point came when I found the hidden will João had handwritten, and it became the key to my victory. The document was old, but it was clear and heartfelt, stating that everything he had built, his home, his business, was meant to go to me and the girls. I presented the will to the court, and though it wasn't witnessed, the timing of João's final recorded confession, where he expressed regret for his actions and acknowledged his true intentions, played a crucial role. The judge recognized my struggle, and the evidence was undeniable. The house that had been sold by Felicia was returned to me, and I was granted full ownership of the business João had worked so hard for. In the end, it was the strength of the truth, João's own words, that helped me secure a future for my daughters and me.
Guys, that was Isabella's tale. Moral of the story to all men. If your woman treats you right and loves you, don't hurt her because of something she couldn't provide. Also, do not have a baby mama. She can destroy your life.
Okay.
Please leave a like, share, and subscribe. Or don't, because I'm just a chill guy. However, another chill guy was so chill that he decided to do something other people consider bad. If you're also chill, click on this video. Or don't, I don't care anyway, because I'm chill.
that song, boy.